Well, I'm sitting in my chair late at night, watching crime unfold under the pale moonlight. From the darkest corner, stories unfold. True crime jewels, she's brash and she is bold. On the YouTube screen, we're digging deep into the mysteries that never sleep. From missing kids in Tennessee to angry husbands named Barry. True crime's calling, and we're taking the time. So grab a seat, don't miss a beat. This True Crime Jewels got what you need. From missing people to twisted minds, we're unraveling secrets old Barry tried to hide. Every clue, every twist and turn. In the world of crime, there's always more to learn. On the YouTube screen, we're digging deep into the mysteries that never sleep. From Christopher's anger to Stephen Fisher's lies. The truth is calling, and justice won't be denied. So grab a seat, don't miss a beat. True crime jewels on the YouTube streets. Lights are low, suspense is high. We're chasing truth, we spot every lie. Step into the darkness, hold on tight. Two flashlights out there in the dead of night. On the YouTube screen, we're digging deep. Barry Morphew's case is hot. A boy in Tennessee won't be left behind. From the coldest cases to the ones that shine, true crime's calling, and we're taking the time. So grab a seat, don't miss a beat. This True Crime Jewels got what you need. We're always watching Barry and waiting for the truth. In the world of crime, we discuss the proof. So hit that play and join the true crime journey with Jewels of Thought and her gemstone family.
Hi, everybody. I hope you guys are doing very well on this beautiful afternoon. It finally quit raining on us here on the Texas Gulf Coast. Isn't that right, show poodles? Boy, we have had a lot of water. All right, so we are going to talk some more about this step monster from hell. I mean, the truth is Kimberley Sullivan from Waterbury, Connecticut. She is the evil stepmother from Cinderella come to life. And truly of the worst of these true crime cases that we follow that involve abusive parents. This is so horrible, isn't it? Because it's like this 30-year slow death. Oh my goodness, Deanna. Can it not make you grateful for the horrible parents you had? Right? Like we all can think back to things that our parents did. Some of our parents were worse than others. But man, this woman absolutely takes the cake. And look, it doesn't take much to look at her and tell that she's not normal. She's not okay. Now, when she was arrested, she was dressed very nice. I have not found any information about what kind of work she was doing. Do any of you guys know? Have y'all heard who did she work for, or what kind of work, or like, do you know anything? No, not yet. Okay, well, they're keeping it quiet, I'm not sure why, but they are kind of keeping things under wrap. And like I said, when she was arrested, she was dressed very nice. She did have some old cheapy earrings on that are like from the dollar store. I recognize them, these butterfly hoops. Rosebud. There you go. What was she doing with J.C. Penney's? Was she just like a store, like a sales clerk, or did she work in the office, or what? Do we know? Her husband owned a kickboxing business. So the stepson's name, I'm not gonna put it out for his just for his own privacy. I don't really want to. They didn't really detail what she did at the store. Okay, so she works for J.C. Penney's. According, hey Diane, yay! I'm glad you were able to meet with us. Good, good, good. We have all been missing Diane very much, so it's good to have you. Okay, so she worked for J.C. Penney's, and she was dressed nice, and so it is very hard to imagine what would make any person, anybody, do what this woman did. Hey, because here's why. If she had simply locked him away and then completely forgotten about him, then he would have passed away, right? From malnutrition, no water, that kind of thing. But she was clearly giving him food and water, at least a bare minimum that would just keep him right there, not just kind of at death's door. So there's something quite sadistic about that, or insane, that there's something wrong with her. I know, Deanna. There's something wrong with her that she would do this. Maybe pangs of guilt. Maybe she would decide, hey, I'm going to let him die. But then she couldn't tolerate it when it got bad. And then, it's so I have a lot of questions how this could happen. The other part of that is, is she an alcoholic, or is she a drug addict? And she was prone to long stretches of blackout drinking, or drugs that would just keep her asleep all the time. And she was unaware of the passing of time, perhaps. I just don't know. It's, people's days, they roll slowly from one day into the next, and the behaviors become these long, drawn out routines. And that would include even unhealthy behavior, right? That it just becomes more comfortable to do the familiar, even though it's not healthy, even though it's not fulfilling. It's comfortable, and it gives you a sense of peace. So is that what happened with this woman? Maybe her husband, before he died, maybe he was abusive. Maybe he controlled the home in a way that it wasn't comfortable for any of them. And she fell into sort of a numb, detached state that when he did leave, die, that she didn't change what she was doing. It's just hard to understand. 20 years locked away, and basically what I've heard described from a couple of the firefighters and policemen, really it was just like a large walk-in closet. It's not like a big full pretty bedroom. So he even he devised a way for him to be able to go to the bathroom and route it out through a hole in the wall or the windows, so that the urine didn't build up in his room. But even he had a radio that he listened to, and that's, you may think that that's quite trivial, considering the whole picture of what went on. That radio becomes like the parent. The radio becomes the one single connection to real life. The radio is his companion. It's his lifeline. It's his comfort. It's his teacher. So the radio becomes quite critical in terms of long-term healing. Okay. And I'm going to talk about what this sort of isolation, the kinds of effects that it can have on him. There have been some doctors that have spoken out about his physical condition. Obviously, muscles not very well developed. His limbs are basically deformed for not being able to move, staying in one position for too long. He will have kidney, liver problems that will be lifelong, that they will not really heal. But I can speak on the psychosocial development and how growing up in such a severe and profound state of neglect, how that would affect him, and what kind of healing, what kind of work that he will be doing even for the next, I don't know, 20, 30 years, right? So one thing that I would ask you guys to do, and you guys know, this is not typical of me. This is not my thing. I don't do this. I'm going to put in the chat the link to the GoFundMe. So they have a GoFundMe set up for him. It's called Connecticut Rescue, A Second Chance. It is being organized and administered by an organization called Safe Haven of Greater Waterbury. They write, "We are reaching out to help a Connecticut man who endured unimaginable hardship. For 20 years, he was held captive in a room, subjected to abuse, starvation, and neglect. He was rescued last month after courageously setting a fire to gain his freedom. This brave individual, now 32 years old, is 5 feet 9 inches tall and 68 pounds. He was trapped in this horrific situation since he was 11. He has been deprived of basic medical and dental care. There has been no education. He has suffered physically and mentally from all of the abuse that he has endured. With the help of the first responders, he was rescued from the fire, treated for smoke inhalation, and began to regain his sense of hope. Now he's facing the immense challenge of rebuilding his life after such a traumatic experience. Funds raised will go toward providing the victim with medical and dental care, counseling and therapy for physical and emotional recovery, housing and daily living expenses as he rebuilds his independence, and support for legal fees, ensuring that he will be able to pursue justice for the abuse that he has suffered. Please consider supporting him in his journey toward recovery and freedom. Thank you for your generosity and for helping bring hope to someone who has suffered far too long." So again, this Safe Haven of Greater Waterbury is a 501c3 that's connected to the city. They generally provide support to victims of domestic violence and sexual abuse. This agency has been established since 1978. And so, we can have confidence in this group. Let me post their link to their website in case you would like to call before you donate. But I hope that you will, even $2, as many people as are in the United States and have heard of this story, even $2 a person can be enough to help this man try to find a way to get started in life. This is going to be in many ways, it's not likely that he'll in many ways he'll stay 11 years old. But in terms of physical therapy, he's going to have some dietary challenges that are going to be really significant. So I'm sure that there will be in-house nursing that will have to help him with feeding tubes and things like that. So it's going to be, he's got a long battle ahead of him. All right. So the first thing I want to do is just listen to an interview that was done with his biological mother and his biological sister. And we have to be really careful, I think, especially in these cases where abuse has already been so rampant, so intense. The biological mother she's got a lot of regret and a lot of guilt. She also has a story of herself as a young woman, and she made some difficult decisions. And one of those difficult decisions was to allow her husband to take her son and to be that she wouldn't have contact with the baby. So she thought she was doing the right thing. She was in a bad place emotionally and physically, and she thought she was doing the right thing. She thought that this was the son's biological father. He had a wife who seemed normal and was educated, and she just believed that she was doing the right thing. She thought that was right, and she said she used to go to the school or not the school, the park, and try to get a glimpse of him, and she always thought about him. And so it is very easy to be angry and judgmental, but in this situation, maybe expand your thoughts a little bit. Here's what I mean. This young man, he doesn't have anything at all, not even a history. He really has nothing. It's like starting his life as a 5-year-old with no parent, no friends, no family, nothing. So he has nothing, and he's got the impact and effects of extreme malnutrition, neglect, abuse, and it might actually support him. It may help him to try and build a relationship with his biological mother. Not a relationship where they're like all living together and being all besties playing Monopoly every night. Not like that, but some connection to the outside world that gives him a sense of continuity and foundation. So she would basically serve as a vehicle for the future, not to just jump in and start being besties, but for a psychologist to work with them together and try to build some kind of bond that he will benefit from in the long run. So I think we got to take a deep breath and try really hard to leave judgment behind and hope for the best. I do think that's what it comes down to. All right, I'm going to be quiet now.
Biological mother and half-sister.
In a new exclusive interview, they sat down with NBC Connecticut's Amanda Pitts to share how they have been searching for him for years.
It's hard to think about what he had to go through. Just knowing that he was right there.
Tracy Valorand has spent the last 3 decades wondering where her son was, not knowing he was a few towns over, allegedly being held captive in a room at the hands of his stepmother.
I don't hate people at all. This one, I hate.
The 52-year-old gave up custody of her son shortly after his birth in 1993.
And you know what? I hate the woman too. I hate her too. So go ahead. I'm not going to cast judgment.
When asked why, she says the story starts with her daughter Heather Tessman and losing custody of her back in 1990.
DCF took her. Said that she had shaken baby syndrome.
Valorand says her daughter's father was charged and Tessman went to live with foster parents. She said the custody battle broke her. Around this time is when she met her son's father, Craig Sullivan.
I ended up trying to kill myself because I knew I wasn't getting her back. Craig would visit me while I was in the hospital. After we got married, we had our son.
But she still struggled.
I was still having issues coping. Things didn't work out between the two of us. And I was thinking that I was giving my son a better chance at a full life. If I had known what...
It's so horrible.
I just can't fathom. I have no words.
Her son went on to live with his father and Kimberley Sullivan. Valorand said she made attempts to get back into her son's life.
There was a part that I was told.
And to be fair, if you look at it from this woman's perspective, you see the big, pretty house, right? You look at that and it looks like if you don't have anything, if you're suffering mental illness or addiction and you're just struggling to get by day to day, and then you look at the house of your ex-husband and his new wife, you see this big, pretty 2-story house, a pretty yard. You just think it's a better place. You just believe that.
Old Craig would actually take him for walks. I would park there and be there for hours just trying to see if I seen him. Never seen him.
When he turned 18, did you try more?
Absolutely. High school yearbooks. I know I started there. Nothing in Waterbury, nothing in Wolcott.
I didn't have any reason to worry because as far as I knew, he was with his parents, living his life.
His life, according...
Talk about how powerful genes are. You cannot discern the daughter's voice from the mother's voice. I've never heard that so clear. I mean, they have the exact same voice.
To him was spent in seclusion.
What were they doing? Were they waiting for him to actually die? What were they going to do then?
Going forward, Valorand and Tessman say they plan to be at every court appearance of Sullivan's.
I'm going to be there for my son.
I'm going to be there for my brother. Just stare daggers through his skull.
As for the son and brother they haven't yet met, they hope to someday.
He's in a very delicate stage right now. So
if he reaches out, absolutely. But it's not about us. It's about him and his recovery.
You're just waiting on that call.
Yeah.
You could just hear the heartbreak and anger in their voices. They are, though, grateful for the community support. So far, a GoFundMe for the victim has already raised nearly $200,000 in Waterbury.
Okay, so the interesting interview, and then the next thing I want to listen to. No, not that one. Where's the, hold on. This is what I want right here. Yep. Okay, so this was a hearing they had yesterday. And I'm not going to kid. I watched it yesterday and it burned me up. Okay, now I want to know what you guys think, sincerely, because I was actually like on my high horse. You know, I'm going to call that courthouse. I want to talk to that judge. You know, I was furious. They ended up going back to court yesterday, and the prosecution is asking for them to basically lock this woman up, right? Put her in damn jail. Why the hell is she out walking around when she was judge, jury, and nearly executioner of her stepson, who's been treated worse than a dog or a cat? I mean, what they have done is that was unforgivable. And so they had this hearing, and afterwards I was furious. I was so mad I couldn't even like go live or anything because I was just livid. Now she's currently out on a $300,000 bond. She says that she's homeless. I guess that the house is locked down as a crime scene, so she can't be in the house. Where did she come up with $300,000? She had to mortgage the house, would be my only guess. And unless her husband, when he died, had a good insurance policy. So maybe that's how. But anyway, so she does have a $300,000 bond. And well, we'll just play the hearing so you can listen. It's not really very long, but I'm warning you, you're going to be angry.
Good morning, Your Honor. Good morning. Please have a seat. No cell phones on, walking away, no talking.
Before we begin, any objections to the media? No, Your Honor. Not from the state. Madam Kimberley Sullivan, 2 on the Part A regular docket.
Good morning, Your Honor. Ioannis Kaloidis on behalf of Ms. Sullivan. She is present and approaching.
There's that heifer. You nasty heifer.
The state's filed a motion to modify the defendant's conditions of release. We are in receipt of the motions from the defendant in response. I would like to point out for the record that Connecticut Practice Book section.
And I would just like to exercise some of my demons here, if you guys would give me a minute. Kimberly, your makeup looks ridiculous. Fix yourself. You're a grown-ass woman. Look how you're behaving. Look what you did to that young man.
Section 3813, 3814 in Connecticut General Statutes 5469 and 5469B, and the relevant case law from those statutes gives this court the authority to modify conditions of release at any time. I disagree with the defense. There has to be a change in circumstances, and the court always has authority. The state is renewing its request for EMS monitoring house arrest and in the alternate GPS monitoring.
And I believe this is the biological mother. If you look to the left of the screen, you see the woman in the striped shirt, the blue and white stripe with the orange vest. Look right left to her in a blue blazer. I think that's the biological mother, and she looks angry, and I'm angry too. I don't blame her.
The state's also requesting that the defendant, if she has a passport, it be surrendered. The state still submits to the court this defendant is a substantial risk of flight. She faces the rest of her life, or a significant period of the rest of her life, incarcerated if she's convicted of these charges. That makes it a significant incentive to flee this jurisdiction and to not appear in court. If it's come to court, face the charges, and if she's convicted, face the rest of your life in jail or flee. I think it's a pretty simple alternative, an equation would permit her to flee. This is a strong case for the state. The court has read the arrest warrant. But in addition to that strength, since the media coverage of this case, several additional witnesses have come forward. For example, a friend of the defendants of 21 years has come forward and provided a written statement to the state, to the police, that in the 21 years she's known this defendant, she's never spoken of a stepson. She was shocked to learn she had a stepson, and that friend was never allowed in this house.
Disgusting.
Additionally, I'd like to point out to the court, it's a domestic violence case.
Yes, it is.
With a domestic violence victim.
Yep.
The GPS monitoring or EMS house arrest is often imposed for far less serious crimes in domestic violence matters and other matters. Since the arraignment, the state has had an opportunity to meet with this victim. This victim is afraid. This victim lives in fear. I introduced myself to the victim, explained who I was. His first question in this fear is, why is she out walking around when I was locked up in a room for 20 years?
Oh my God.
He is following this on TV and social media, so he is aware of what's happening. And I say that because it would lead to his fear. Based on all that, the state is asking for those conditions.
She should be locked up.
Your Honor, I respectfully and vigorously object to the state's motion.
You are a horrible person.
It is improper, and I believe if it was to be granted, it would be unjust and a violation of my client's state and federal constitutional rights. This is the third time we are back addressing the same issues. Bond has been set. Conditions of release have been addressed by the court. The state made essentially the same arguments on prior occasions, which were considered by the court and rejected by the court. We are back now, 2 weeks later, giving the state another bite at the apple. And the court was clear on March 13th, when the court rejected the conditions that are being sought. The judge at the time made clear she was rejecting those conditions and made clear that we would keep this on a short leash, basically, come back in 2 weeks or whatever. And if there were any violations, she would reconsider. A defendant must be able to rely on the representations and the orders of the court. And when a defendant is told, you will be released under these conditions, and if you abide by these conditions, you'll be fine. The only thing that has changed is now we have a 2-week track record of compliance.
I hate to say this, but it is cases like this, moments like these, that defense attorneys get a really bad rap. And I know that with our way of law, we're all entitled to legal representation. Those defense attorneys are obligated to do the best they can, but they can't suborn perjury. They cannot engage in perjury themselves. The guy has said, no, he was not being held against his will. That is not true. What's wrong with this attorney? The police officer said that there were external locks. There were locks on the outside of his bedroom door. How's this attorney get away with saying, no, it's all a lie. The media is lying to everyone. This guy's a snake. A snake.
That is the only change that I have seen. That is the only documentation that has been provided to me, or that I've been able to see so far, is a report from bail indicating a track record of compliance. So the only thing that has changed in the eyes of the defense with respect to the case is that my client has been complying with the conditions and has done what has been asked of her. Despite the fact that she's complied with the conditions, we're now back seeking to add additional conditions.
She should be under the jailhouse, buddy.
To convict Ms. Sullivan, and the whole world already has. But this is the only place, the only room in this country where we have an opportunity to protect her rights. And as unpopular as that may seem,
yeah, I'm sorry.
I don't give a
damn about her rights.
Her rights. No one else's. When we talk about the
and it is disgusting that you stand there and talk about her rights after she denied a young man food and water and fresh air for 20 years. You've got to be a special kind of psychopath to stand there on your high horse and talk about her rights need to be protected. Her rights, she can jump for all I care with her rights.
Constitutional rights and criminal law, they're to protect the accused, regardless of how unpopular it may be. So, Your Honor, I think it would be, respectfully, Your Honor, I think it would be a mistake to add conditions at this time. And I filed a supplemental memorandum. And although it's my supplemental memorandum, I think to some extent it is the strongest argument and one the court should be the most concerned about. And that is protecting my client's right to a fair trial. She is presumed innocent. Maybe not to the rest of the world, but this is the one place where that presumption should remain. And by adding conditions, the court is sending a message that she has done something wrong, or the court feels that she has done something wrong, or the court feels that something has changed to increase the conditions of release, increase her monitoring, when none of that has occurred. So by granting the state's motion, a message is sent to the world that the presumption of innocence means nothing. And that cannot happen, Your Honor. The presumption of innocence.
In the words of Christopher Proudfoot, let me help you out there, buddy. Let me make it crystal clear for you. What they're trying to do is they're trying to act on behalf of the abused, the young man that had his life robbed from him, the young man that will forever live with the scars and the disabilities and the illnesses that this heifer invoked upon him. That's what we care about. We don't give a damn about you fancy little $1,000 suit or your bullshit client. We don't care about that. We care about that young man who's got a nightmare road ahead of him. And this woman ought to be sitting in jail. I don't care what anybody says. She should be sitting in jail until she is confronted with a jury, period.
Is tied to bail. I cited the Troconis case, which cites a U.S. Supreme Court case, which talks about the importance and how the presumption of innocence ties into bail. The whole world is watching. And if we add additional conditions now, we are sending a message that she has done something wrong, or that the court believes she has done something wrong. I, as her attorney, stand by her. She is presumed innocent, as unpopular as that may be. Now, getting back to my original arguments in this, Your Honor, the court on Wednesday referenced the Ayala case. And I looked at the Ayala case, and this is distinguishable. Yes, the court has the inherent authority to set conditions and modify conditions. Just because the court has the authority doesn't mean that it should exercise that authority. And I'd ask the court not to exercise that authority. In Ayala and in all the other cases where there's been a review of a court adding conditions or revoking bond or impacting bail, there has always been something to trigger it, some violation of condition of release, some concern that the defendant will not be able to appear in court or is a danger to anyone else. She has appeared in court despite the difficulty in getting here. There are serious safety concerns. I don't give a damn about her having a hard time getting there. Putting her in a specific area where she cannot leave will only create additional safety concerns.
Oh, bullshit.
There are numerous threats against her. Numerous people have made threats. They're posting them online, talking about not waiting to be able to see her out in public. She needs to be able to have freedom of movement.
No, she doesn't. Why? Why does she need to?
I've actually advised her to leave the state initially, given the media attention, for her own safety. If the court was to put her on a GPS monitoring bracelet, she would not be able to do that. If the court put her on an EMS, she would not be able to leave the residence where she is. That would create additional safety concerns. Getting back to the law here, though, Your Honor, I think the Ayala case is clear that there needs to be, I think it calls for some type of violation. Whether you call it a change of circumstance or not, that's something that had been used, an argument that has always been raised in our state courts here, and I believe it is an appropriate consideration, Your Honor. Your Honor, my motion also details her ties to the community, all the things that the court's already considered in setting the appropriate bond here, Your Honor. Everything has been considered by the court, it's been evaluated, and there is nothing different. I understand there's a lot of public pressure, and the public sentiment may be that there should be more conditions on her. But the bond that's set is appropriate. The conditions that are set are appropriate. She's abiding by those conditions. The state has argued this before. It has been rejected. There is absolutely nothing new other than a positive track record. Your Honor, respectfully, I cannot understate how strongly I feel about this. I do not believe any change in the conditions of her release would be appropriate right now. I believe they would have a direct and significant impact on her right to a fair trial. And I believe it is a dangerous message for the court to send. And it is one that will impact and bear directly on the presumption of innocence, which is something that is crucial in this case because nobody has afforded her that. And we look to the court to protect that. Your Honor, respectfully, I ask the court deny the state's motion.
All right, we're here today on the state's motion to add conditions of release, specifically either EMS house arrest and or GPS monitoring in order to reasonably ensure that A, she appears in court, and B, to protect the safety of the public. And in making this decision, I'm instructed by General Statute 54-64A, subsection D2, to consider the following factors when considering any conditions of release. And I'll just go through them one at a time. First, the nature and circumstances of this offense and the seriousness of the charges against her. There are 2 B felonies. One of them carries mandatory minimum jail time. There are other felony charges against her in addition to that, misdemeanor charges. And the allegations are arguably the most troubling that I've seen during my tenure as a judge and show really an unthinkable amount.
Look at her reaction to his words. Watch her eyes, blinking real fast, shake her head. Look at the reaction. She has literally no idea how disgusting it is what she did to that young man. She legitimately thinks that she's perfectly normal. Watch her reaction. It's amazing.
And the allegations are arguably the most troubling that I've seen during my tenure as a judge and show really an unthinkable amount of a lack of empathy. And I do stress.
Why is she shaking her head no? Why is she batting her eyes like so? Oh, you mean I'm the worst you've ever seen? What? It's unbelievable.
They are just allegations at this time. 2, her past record of appearing in court. She has no prior cases, no prior failures to appear in this case. Her family and community ties to the area. She has 2 daughters in the area, and I believe she is temporarily living with them, but she has no permanent address. We learned that since the last court date. As far as her employment record, to my knowledge, she has worked for the majority of her life, most recently at JCPenney. As far as her financial resources and her mental health conditions, I'm not aware of her financial resources at this time, but since the last court date, it has come to my attention that she was admitted to the hospital to address certain mental health conditions. As far as the weight of the evidence, we haven't pre-tried the case. There hasn't been any discovery. I don't know how strong the case is for the state at this time. But since the last court date, according to Attorney Thurkelson, he has spoken with the complainant more, learned additional information about the case, and additional witnesses have come forward. So from the state's perspective, it has gotten stronger. Whether she has been previously convicted of similar crimes, again, she has no record, so she hasn't. And the likelihood that she would commit another crime if she is released, which she has been, but as far as the GPS and the EMS conditions. On the one hand, she has no record. So you could easily argue that if she has no record to date, she is unlikely to commit any crimes while she's released. On the other hand, I can see the argument that someone who could show, again, just according to the allegation, someone that could show such an extreme indifference to human life, have such a lack of empathy, if that person could commit that type of crime, they're certainly
Absolutely.
Likely to commit another type of crime.
Absolutely.
So in considering all of these factors, most specifically, the serious nature of the allegations and her additional mental health conditions, the mental health conditions in particular, since we learned from the last court date, as well as the fact that we've learned that she has no permanent residence at this time, I think putting GPS monitoring on her is appropriate to protect the public and to ensure that she comes to court. However, I am denying the state's request for EMS house arrest. I don't believe, given the factors I consider, that that is wrong. As far as the next court date or any additional issues?
Your Honor, may we enter a not guilty plea and make a jury election today?
Yes, noted for the record.
With respect to a next date, Your Honor, is April 29th acceptable?
Steve would ask for a shorter date.
What date in particular?
I would like 3 weeks, one to monitor compliance, two to update the court on the discovery process.
You want to say April 15th?
I'm away that week, Your Honor.
22nd?
I have a conflict that day, Your Honor. Can we do the 21st? Actually. Actually, Your Honor, we'll make the 22nd work. I can juggle that.
And I'll leave you with this. I agree with your attorney. These are just allegations. You are not guilty. You have the presumption of innocence. You will get a fair trial. The reason I put GPS monitoring on you has nothing to do with you being guilty. It shouldn't be interpreted that way. We'll get discovery. The state will dig in. April 20th. And we'll recess for the next one.
All right.
You're going to walk with me. I'm going downstairs.
Oh, that just, so if you feel angry, put a 1. I'm telling you, when I saw this, I was just livid. Livid, livid, livid. Look at that snake's eyes. She had zero compassion for a kid that she had known since he was 3 years old. 3 years old, and she had no problem locking him away like he was some forgotten pair of shoes. And then they get up there and they talk about all her protections and she's got to be safe. She didn't give a damn about him. So I do have respect for the law. I am glad that I live in this nation with the Constitution. I get all that. And I know there has to be a defense attorney. I get all that. But this just burned my butt that this judge did not put her in jail. Why didn't they give her $1 million? You know, if it'd been another week, it's possible that it would be a murder charge. It's terrible. Yeah, well, and that's the fear, right? She's going to run because she doesn't have anything to lose. She had to mortgage her house to pay her $300,000. She has nothing else. She's probably lost her job. Everybody in town hates her guts. She's probably got a lot of embarrassment and shame, although she probably hates the boy. So yeah, of course she's a flight risk. 100%. Anyway, I hope that she doesn't waive her right to a speedy trial. I hope the trial is in 1 month. I may even want to fly up there and be there so I can heckle her. No, I'm not a heckler. All right. So there is that nightmare, terrible, horrible situation. So look, talking about this case, it just really gets us because of the severe level of social isolation, severe neglect. There was physical abuse. He was allowed out of his room to clean the house and then locked back up in the room. It's like this woman had this delusion of Cinderella, right? Some backwards, upside down world of Cinderella. But yes, this is a nightmare that has impact on neural pathways, the development of the brain, the socioeconomic, the psychosocial strata, just being able to communicate, use language properly. Literally every critical period in his life has been disrupted. The developmental process is completely disrupted, and there's really no going back. There's no going back and recovering that period of time. We are people, human beings are social animals. I tell people all the time we're herd animals like cattle or horses. From the moment that we are born, our brains are wired to connect. One of the most interesting phenomena that I've ever seen is the immediate aftermath of the birth of the baby. And they lay the baby on the chest of the mom, and they lock eyes, okay? And they just stare at one another. It's the longest known sustained eye contact, prolonged eye contact that there is in primates. And when the baby and the mother are engaged in this locked, prolonged eye contact, their brains are going crazy. Like they put special kind of PET scan where they could watch what was happening to the electrical energy in the brain. And when that sustained prolonged eye contact starts, the baby and the mother, their brains are being hyper stimulated. So it's a fascinating thing to see. And we don't just come into the world reaching out and forming an intense connection to our mothers or to our primary caregivers. We have the same sorts of connections to our siblings and our grandparents. Even strangers can connect with a baby in a grocery store, and both of them have a shared moment that evokes smiles in each of them. So these are moments of connection for the baby that teach them critical connection, and it provides the underpinning of future communication. For example, if you have a baby that has these satisfying connections and they respond with smiles and cooing, that it invites the stranger to respond with delight, and the baby gets a positive feedback. And that baby then will go on feeling competent to interact with their environment, and they will learn to be fun and happy and cute, and they'll learn how to charm others, which provides for a really strong social developmental experience. But if something goes wrong, the baby is ill, or perhaps the baby is in a state of neglect and has not had any enriching interactions with the primary caregiver. Sometimes we see this when mothers are going through severe postpartum depression and they're not picking up the baby and they're not spending time with the baby. Those babies don't make that critical connection with strangers. They see the stranger tries to get a response from the baby, and the baby either just stares or will turn their head away. And so then the stranger walks away with an unsatisfying social connection. And therefore the baby grows up distrusting of the world and feels like they're unable to control their emotion or their social environment. So these form the foundation for how we interact in our natural levels of extroversion as we age and become older. So when a child is isolated or severely neglected, it's not just that they have emotional problems. Their development is actually being completely disrupted. There are critical windows of psychosocial development in early childhood where the brain is basically a sponge. It is soaking up these critical interactions. It's soaking up language. It's observing. There's an incredible amount of vicarious learning that's taking place. And most important, the mother, the families, the caregivers are providing social skills training as they're playing with this baby and sort of guiding them. Without that, the child is just in a muted state. They don't know to do anything. And eventually, the instincts that they're born with, like suckling, putting things in their mouth, those are things that ensure their survival. That makes sure that they at least eat. But with time, even those basic postnatal instincts will disappear. And then the child is often either very still and unmoving, almost like locked in a box, or they cry and cry and cry without any kind of comfort. You can't calm them. You can't comfort them. It's almost like the sound of the crying is what is comforting. It's like a type of stimming. They're self-stimulating as they go through this act of long periods of crying. So the damage by missing these critical windows, the damage, it can very often be permanent. We know this not because of extrapolation or hypotheses. We know this because there's actually been kids that have been locked away in closets for multiple years at a time. There have been tales of children that somehow became abandoned in the wild. And then years later, they were found to have survived because some animal brought them food and taught them how to survive. It was a story of a kid in India that was basically adopted by a pack of wild wolves. And, his social development, he basically kind of became a wolf. So our brains are hardwired to learn from our environment and to be connected through language development, shared problem solving, and emotional regulation. We require contact with others to be able to do these basic life skills. Without that, when they are placed in prolonged isolation during these critical times of growth, when they are in prolonged isolation or they're living with another species, a couple of things can happen. Obviously, language development is disrupted. The kid from India with the wolves, he learned all the different barks and mewling sounds of the wolves, but he never really regained language. His primary form of communication was that of a dog, a wolf. So the worst case scenario, the worst outcome are the kids that have been found isolated, locked in dark closets, where there's been no stimulation at all. That is absolute worst case scenario. The kids that have been somehow with other species of animals, they've adopted the animals' behaviors as much as they could, and that mode of communication. And again, depending on when they're found, they don't ever regain. It's not like they can go back. Let's say that they are raised by wolves from the time they're 3 years old to 15 years old. When that 15-year-old is found and then comes under the care of human beings, it's not like you can just sit down with the 15-year-old and teach them to speak the language and to hold, a fork and a knife. They've lost the ability to learn those things. The ability for learning language has sort of closed. And so while they may be able to sort of memorize rote kind of things, it's very limited. It's not even functional in some cases. And you don't get to go back and get it. Now, in the case of this young man in Connecticut, he was 11 years old when he was removed from the schools, right? When the worst of this isolation began. That helps him because the critical periods of plasticity and growth, those things have already occurred when he was still in school. So, and before that. So that is a positive that he has. And then a couple of other positives are, we know that at least for a little while, he was getting out of the room and he was cleaning. So there was some kind of interaction that was happening. And he had that radio. Mark my words, that radio will be what saves him. So even now that he's out and he's at a hospital, he's in a protected environment, I would be willing to bet they brought his radio to him. And his radio is there in the room with him. And that is helping to keep him relaxed and calm. So, let's see. So brains will rewire in order to deal with extreme loneliness. In some of these cases where kids have been locked away, the prefrontal cortex has even been found to have shrunk in no noticeable measurable size. The prefrontal cortex is important because that's the area where our brain generates novel solutions or effective solutions to novel problems, new problems that we've never seen before, encountered before. So decision making becomes very, very difficult. Also, children that are coping with deep loneliness to the point that it actually alters the brain structure. They have a great deal of problems with the amygdala, and the amygdala being responsible for fear, right? Or monitoring the environment because there's danger. That basically, these people that were isolated like that in a dark room, they develop soul-crushing anxiety that is very difficult to treat because it is a brain-based problem. The isolation, the extreme neglect, it actually changes the structure of the brain. So neglect, yes, it can mean locking a kid in a room or depriving them of games and communication. But there's also emotional abandonment, right? You can refuse to interact with the child, but still be feeding them hot dogs. But what about the abandonment of comfort and the abandonment of parallel play, where the child's natural trajectory is to engage in different forms of play and communication at specific windows of time. And if you're not provided that access, what happens? Again, it becomes another route for the brain to rewire itself and to alter its structure. Now, in the case of the young man from Connecticut, he was not denied some of these critical early psychosocial windows of activity. So the prognosis for what he may be able to recover is better over, let's say, a kid who's 3 years old and is locked away with no interaction. We got to remember, his first time being locked in the room was 3 years old. However, he was going to school when his dad was alive until about, was it the 4th grade? So there's a good chance that he can heal emotionally, cognitively. It's a good chance there could be a significant amount of healing. If you think about plasticity after, let's say, a head injury or a stroke, it is possible that he could recover a lot of the socialization and such. But again, you don't know until you do it, until you've gone through that process. And don't forget the radio. I think the radio will end up being his salvation. So mental health obviously takes a huge hit for kids who have grown up isolated and dealing with, severe neglect. Anxiety is brain-based, and because this has a direct effect on the amygdala, it makes it very difficult, even after he's healthy and he has proper nutrition. Managing the overwhelming anxiety will be a lifelong endeavor. There may be expected to be also depression, and of course the symptoms of PTSD will probably emerge. He's not had opportunity to be out in a vulnerable situation and then finding out that he can be safe even when he's away from his home. So I would expect that probably some agoraphobia would probably be uncomfortable, although that's probably going to be a little bit easier to treat and from a behavioral perspective. He's basically going to be stuck in survival mode all the time. And so the wonderful thing about people in survival mode is that you can very easily learn relaxation skills that are effective, and he'll eventually train himself to trust in himself, and he will eventually learn that he can calm himself and he can take control of his thoughts. Except for the anxiety. The anxiety is going to be a different problem because of the damage to the amygdala. There's also the issue of trust. Imagine growing up and never having a reliable adult in your life. In fact, imagine that the people in positions of trust were the very people that inflicted the damage on you. That is a complete disruption to psychosocial development. How do you learn to trust another person when you've been trained that they are the most untrustworthy people that there are? So in these types of situations, friendships are taught in a little bit of a different way. You teach about the utility of friendship and depths of intimacy. Forming friendships becomes very mechanical, and perhaps the shared experience and empathy never really does develop. But you can teach proper friendship skills, but you just don't have that emotional connection. Language skills also will likely be difficult, although he was in school until the 4th grade. He went through those critical periods of brain growth and development, and so he can likely recover the lost language delays. That is probably okay. Social cues also, he'll probably regain that. Also, remember this. He had some level of trust, right? So we think our way through this. He had some level of trust because his stepmother gave him some of his father's old clothes. And that's where he found the lighter, was in the father's clothes. And he ended up in a situation which I think was very much like Ruby Frankie's son, who was able to escape. He did that. He escaped for survival. He knew that he and his sister were dying. He knew that they were dying of starvation. And it was a Hail Mary. It was like, either I try to get out of here, I take this chance, or we're just going to die. And I might as well try because there's nothing left to do, right? Well, I think the same kind of thought process may have happened in this situation, that he had that lighter. He probably had it for months and just didn't know how it would come in handy. And maybe the stepmother had not fed him. Maybe he knew that he was dying. Maybe he was in extreme pain, or he was very, very ill from the malnutrition. And he finally just had this realization, I'm going to die. She has forgotten that I'm up here and I'm too weak to yell, and I'm going to die. So one way or the other, I got to get some help. So I would guess that's probably kind of what happened. Starvation is a really painful way to die. It's about the most painful way that there is to die. So people will do extraordinary things to try to get to water or food when they've been denied for so long, right? So he had to have some level of trust, not very deep because he was in starvation and dehydration, but he had to have some level of trust. So he lights his fire, and, the fire department, the police respond immediately. He's learning. This is a critical learning period for him. So they respond. They immediately take him protectively. They don't stop to talk to the evil stepmother, even though she's standing there trying to talk to him. They walk right past and protect him from her, right there in that critical moment where they put their body between him and her. That again purchased him some trust. He realizes, okay, wait a minute, not everyone is like her. These are strangers, but look what they're doing. They're actually protecting me from her. Then they go to the hospital, where, they probably kept the lights down low in the room. They probably had everything very quiet. They probably only allowed one doctor, one nurse in the room at a time. Everything very, very quiet. The lowest level of stimulation possible. You would not, if you were a medical provider in that situation, you would not freely touch and grab. You would have to wait, ask permission. Can I listen to your heart? Can I do touching them? You have to think about this. So being isolated without any kind of stimulation for a long time, the brain acclimates to that, and that becomes the new norm, correct? Imagine, though, now suddenly, if you're surrounded by activity and normal speech and people hugging you and touching you, your brain would be dramatically overstimulated. I mean, it would be very uncomfortable. I'm being kind saying that. It could trigger a horrific panic attack. So the medical providers would be very sensitive to the need for low stimulation. And so responding that way, then that also builds trust that they're deferring to him and they're asking his permission and they're allowing him to guide what's happening in the moment. So every single interaction that he has been having with the social workers, psychologists, the doctors, the nurses, the physical therapists, the nutritionists, every single interaction, no matter how insignificant it may look on the outside, it's been planned by the providers with that goal of we're forming the foundation to build trust so that hopefully this person can one day find meaningful connection to another human being, learn to trust after what they've been through. There was a Jeannie in 1970 was a 13-year-old girl, Los Angeles. She and her mom came into the welfare office and she could barely walk. She didn't speak. She weighed 59 pounds. And the mother had been able to escape. The mother was severely abused too. She had bruises all over her. She had a terrible situation. And basically the father was, crazy. And he had kept the little girl either strapped down to her potty chair or tied to her crib. There was no one allowed in the room with the baby. There were no toys. It was no artificial light. And this went on for 10 years. She was a prisoner. The mother was a prisoner. When they finally were able to get free and the social workers found them, Jeannie, 13-year-old girl, she was very much just like a blank slate. She didn't even have as much as what this young man has. Because remember, he went to school till he was in the 4th grade. But Jeannie didn't have any of that. She didn't know how to chew solid food. There were no sentences. You couldn't touch her without it evoking a kind of a animalistic type of reaction. So she was the psychologist working with her they really kind of observed her as an oddity. They didn't understand much about what they were looking at, but the term they came up with in the medical research was a feral child, F-E-R-A-L, a wild child, meaning, which was supposed to be a clinical term for a child that grew up with little to no human contact. Thankfully, we don't really use that term anymore, but she has been institutionalized her whole life. They attempted to teach her language skills, speech, social skills, anything that would be bring her back to humanity. And even though she learned some individual words, kind of like a 2-year-old child would do, maybe she could put a couple of words together, but she never went any further than that. And it became really, really clear that language is something that's pre-programmed into our brain, and the ability to learn language is only there for a short period of time. And if we're not exposed to it, we lose it. So she never, no matter how much they worked with her, she never learned to communicate effectively. So she is still alive. She lives in a care center, and they just keep her alive. She stays in her room by herself most of the time with the lights off. She does eat, which is, rewarding, but not too much. No, she doesn't show much motivation to interact with people at all. So what about the kids? Like I said about the kids growing up with the animals that are raising them. The Indian child that I was telling you about earlier, that he was found in India. It was in 1867. His name was Dina. And so apparently the way the story goes is that there were hunters and they saw Dina running with a pack of wolves. He was on all fours. He was howling. He could make all the different sounds that the wolves made. He was 6 years old when he was found. They believed that when he was 3, he got lost in the woods. I'm not sure about that, but that's the story. And he had no trace of human language or behavior at all. And so they took him, gave him to some missionaries. They tried to teach him to walk upright, wear clothes, speak. And you remember the Baloo Bear, what was it? Ooh, 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 I want to be like you. Ooh, ooh. What was that? Jungle Story. So the Jungle Book kind of took the story of Dina and made it like a child, made it like mythical, and that Dina was enjoying his time with his animal friends and that they were talking to each other like humans, and they just expanded on, anthropomorphized the story basically. But they never really were able to have much luck teaching him. No speech at all. He would eat cooked food. It took several years to get him to go from raw meat and berries to eat regular food. He never did develop speech, though curiously, Dina in his older age learned to smoke cigarettes. And so he would happily sit around and smoke cigarettes. And he died very early when he was 34 years old, never really regaining his humanity or even forming a bridge. He never really showed any interest in other people. There was a Ukrainian, this was more well documented in the 1980s. Oksana Malaya was from Ukraine. She had alcoholic parents that lost her when she was a toddler. They left her outside. She wandered off and she ended up finding a dog kennel. And the dog kennel had like a bunch of stray dogs there, right? So she climbed up into the dog kennel and stayed there for the longest of time, and nobody knew that she was there, but she learned to survive with the dogs. By the time that she was found, she was 8 years old. She barked exactly like a real dog. She ate raw meat and she could run very fast up on all fours. So she had professional psychologists working with her for many years. She was institutionalized. She did learn to speak, but again, it was only 2, 3, 4 words in a sentence. It wasn't very sophisticated. She never, ever, ever acquired what we would call functional speech. Today, she is in her 40s and she lives in an institution, in a care home, and she spends her time hanging out with her pet dogs. She speaks very little to people. She doesn't really even notice when they come in the room. So these are, interesting stories. What happens to a kid like Jeannie, who's locked in a closet and isolated, or Dina and Oksana, that at least were in the wild and they had some kind of feedback from other living creatures. All three face a level of neglect from humanity, but it's easy to see that the kids that at least were raised by animals, that they did develop a social strata. They did develop socialization. It was just for the wrong species. And they never swayed from that. What we learn in our critical years tends to stay with us. And even though we may have some disruption to our psychosocial development by neglect or abuse, basically, if we're protected through the early critical stages, we can recover what are later lost in later neglect. So I do think for the young man in Connecticut, I do think he has a great potential to develop functional language and to develop trust and build connections to people. And I think that it's going to take some specialized care and some very empathetic, loving people. And yes, I think that his biological mother and sister are going to be a big, important part of his care and his recovery. So, all right, Mowgli from the Jungle Book. That's right, Carol Johnson. Exactly. Yeah. Chimps are learning to use tools. So that's an evolution in thought. Yeah. Mountain gorillas can do sign language. They can speak with sign language, or we can do visual words, and they can put together full sentences with visual words. And I mean, definitely primates have the ability for communication. Okay, so this has been an hour and a half of nonstop talking. I'm going to have to stop. This actually is so vile. It's unbelievable that that heifer is basically free after such an extensive period of blatant criminality. Who is this judge? I'm going to reach out to him. Yeah, I mean, people are outraged. People in the local community are furious. One of the reasons that they're so furious that this woman got bail and is walking around is because the principal of the school where this young man was going to school, the principal reached out to the police and CPS like 5 times. And they kept saying, where is this kid? Everybody's looking for him. Where is he? Where is he? Where is he? And they abandoned him. They just dropped the ball. I mean, it reminds you of Harmony. And I mean, we've had some cases where kids got lost in the CPS system, you know? It's terrible. It's really terrible. It's amazing how quickly some species are now evolving. There are female elephants growing dust. Oh, wow. I didn't know that. So some female elephants are growing tusks and testicles that look like appendages because there's a lack of male elephants in the wild. Wow, that's amazing. Ceresia, I am sick of CPS. I'm with you. I am absolutely, I don't think I can take another failure of CPS. They just expect everyone to just understand and overlook it. Enough is enough. Enough. This kid was in that. Okay, I'm not going to get mad. But yeah, we got to do better. We have to do better. The CPS has got to do better. And I don't know what the answer is, unless maybe all of us run for political office. And once we become representatives and senators, then we can all jump up and down and say, reform the Child Protective Services. Totally agree. Me too, Diane. Oh my God. Totally. And you know, I absolutely support this idea that if you are convicted of killing a child or harming a child in a specific way, that you should be open to the death penalty. I'm there. I'm good. Do you know how sick you have to be to look at a little 5, 6, 7-year-old kid and ravage them, destroy them? You're a sick puppy. There's zero empathy in you if you're willing to hurt a little kid. So yeah, I'm good. Give them the death penalty. I don't care. Yeah. If you have to harm a child, kill a child, you have no business with modern society. None. Not even in a prison. You need to be dealing with your maker. All right. Okay, y'all. Thank y'all so much. I know this was long and I hope it wasn't boring, but I've heard a lot of people talking about what's going to become of this young man and what will his recovery period be like. And so, I thought some of you might be interested, in some of the different issues that would be important as he begins to recover. And the very positive thing that he went to school until 4th grade, so he met those critical periods of development, and he had the radio, which was a lifeline. It provided cognitive stimulation. So I think he's got a very good prognosis. I really do. I'm talking about cognitively, psychologically. All right. Thank y'all for listening. I appreciate being here with you on Saturday. If you haven't subscribed, I hope that you will. Please hit the thumbs up on your way out. And y'all have a very nice Saturday night.
Well, I'm sitting in my chair late at night, watching crime unfold under the pale moonlight. From the darkest corner, stories unfold. True crime jewels, she's brash and she is bold. On the YouTube screen, we're digging deep into the mysteries that never sleep. From missing kids in Tennessee to angry husbands named Barry. True crime's calling and we're taking the time. So grab a seat, don't miss a beat. This True Crime Jewels got what you need. From missing people to twisted minds, we're unraveling secrets old Barry tried to hide. Every clue, every twist and turn. In the world of crime, there's always more to learn. On the YouTube screen, we're digging deep into the mysteries that never sleep. From Christopher's anger to Stephen Fisher's lies, the truth is calling and justice won't be denied. So grab a seat, don't miss a beat. True Crime Jewels on the YouTube streets. Lights are low, suspense is high. We're chasing truth, we spot every lie. Step into the darkness, hold on tight. 2 flashlights out there in the dead of night. On the YouTube screen, we're digging deep. Barry Morphew's case is high. A boy in Tennessee won't be left behind. From the coldest cases to the ones that shine, true crime's calling and we're taking the time. So grab a seat, don't miss a beat. This True Crime Jewels got what you need. We're always watching Barry and waiting for the truth. In the world of crime, we discuss the truth. So hit that play and join the ride on this true crime journey. Join Jewels of Thought and our gemstone family.